My name is Nellie Mitchell, and I was working in my home office, a quiet, sunlit room that smells of old books and fresh coffee, when my laptop pinged with a new email. It was an alert from an old Gmail account, one I'd created in high school and hadn't logged into for years. The subject line caught my eye: Emily and Michael's wedding invitation. The sender was my younger sister, Emily Johnson. My heart did a strange, complicated flutter. I clicked on the email, and a sophisticated invitation filled my screen, all gold embellishments and delicate pink roses. The script was elegant. Emily Johnson and Michael Rohr request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration on Saturday, June 15th, at 6 p.m. at the Grand Ballroom, Riverside Hotel. Beneath the formal script, Emily had added a personal note. Hey Nellie, I hope this finds you well. I'm sorry to use this old email, but I don't have your current address or phone number. I found this in my old high school contacts. Despite everything that's happened with our family, I would really love for you to be at my wedding next month. It would mean so much to me to have my only sister there. I hope you'll consider it, even though it's been 12 years since we last spoke. Please let me know if you can make it. Emily. I stared at the screen for a long time, a wave of unexpected emotions washing over me. 12 years. It had been 12 years since I had walked out of that house and never looked back. 12 years since I had spoken a single word to any member of my family. Emily would be 28 now. She was only 16 when I left. I wondered how much she had changed from the pampered, entitled girl who always got her way. Leaning back in my chair, I considered my options. A part of me was curious, a small, stubborn part that wanted to see them all again. Another, larger part of me wanted to delete the email and pretend it had never arrived. But Emily's words, "It would mean so much to me to have my only sister there," struck a chord I thought had long gone silent. Maybe she had matured. Maybe things were different. After 20 minutes of quiet contemplation, I made a decision. I wrote back a simple, concise reply. Hi Emily, congratulations on your engagement. I will be at your wedding. I look forward to seeing you after all these years. Nellie. I hit send before I could change my mind. The next few weeks were a flurry of preparation. I had to clear my schedule, which meant rescheduling several important client meetings and pushing back the deadlines on a few key projects. My personal assistant, a godsend named Sarah, handled the logistics with her usual unflappable competence. I spent a considerable amount of time pondering a wedding gift. I didn't want to be ostentatious, but I also didn't want to appear cheap. I finally settled on a beautiful crystal vase from Tiffany & Company, elegant, a clear gesture of goodwill, but understated enough not to draw undue attention. It cost around $1,500, a negligible amount for me now, but a sum I hoped would convey that I cared. The day before the wedding, I flew back to my hometown for the first time in over a decade. The city looked both familiar and strange, like a photograph faded by time. I took a taxi from the airport to the Marriott downtown, checked into my suite, and unpacked the simple, navy blue dress I had chosen for the occasion. It was beautifully tailored, but deliberately unflashy. Over the years, I had learned that true wealth often whispers rather than shouts. That evening, I ordered room service and tried to mentally prepare myself for seeing my family again. I wondered if my parents would be surprised to see me, if they had changed at all from the people who had shown their 18-year-old daughter the door with nothing but the clothes on her back. I considered calling Emily to let her know I was in town, but decided against it. I would see her tomorrow. That would be soon enough. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run through the quiet downtown streets. The familiar landmarks stirred a mixture of nostalgia and a dull, distant ache. After my run, I spent the afternoon relaxing, reading a book, trying to keep my mind from spiraling into a vortex of old hurts and anxieties. Around 4 p.m., I began to get ready. I did my makeup carefully, polished, but not overdone. I styled my hair in a simple, elegant updo and put on the navy dress, accessorizing with a pair of classic pearl earrings. Looking at myself in the full-length mirror, I saw a woman who was composed, professional, and confident. I grabbed the beautifully wrapped Tiffany box from the dresser and called a taxi to the Riverside Hotel. The hotel looked exactly as I remembered it from my childhood, a place of special occasion dinners and hushed elegance. As I walked down the grand hallway toward the ballroom, the sound of music and laughter grew louder. I stepped into the room and was immediately struck by a sea of familiar faces. There was my Aunt Margaret, older now, but with the same bright, easy smile. My Uncle Bob, his hair completely gray, stood near the bar. My cousin Jennifer, now a woman in her 30s, was chatting with a group by the window. As I moved further into the room, people started to notice me. Aunt Margaret was the first to approach, her eyes wide with surprise. "Nellie, oh my goodness, is that really you?" she exclaimed, rushing over to give me a hug. As she pulled back, however, I saw a strange expression flicker across her face. It wasn't just surprise. It was something else. Pity. "Hi, Aunt Margaret. You look wonderful," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, honey, you look." She paused, her eyes raking over me from head to toe. "You look good, too. Really good, actually. Better than I expected." Better than she expected? What did that mean? Before I could ask, Uncle Bob joined us. "Nellie, well, I'll be damned," he said, his voice a little too loud. "Emily said you might come, but we weren't sure. How are you doing, kiddo?" "I'm doing well, Uncle Bob. How have you been?" "Can't complain. Still at the plant. Same old, same old." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "So, how are things with you? Did you ever find a decent place to live? Your mom mentioned you were having some trouble with that, finding an apartment and all. And work? Still looking for something steady." I stared at him, completely bewildered. "I owned my own company. I lived in a beautiful, custom-built home in a gated community. Why on earth would he think I was struggling to find an apartment?" "I'm doing fine, Uncle Bob." "Really?" I said, my voice even. Aunt Margaret leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "And what about that husband of yours, dear? Did things ever work out with him?" Again, I was lost. "What husband?" They exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. "Well, we just heard." "Never mind, dear," Aunt Margaret said, patting my arm in a way that felt deeply patronizing. "We're just so glad you're here. And that you're okay." More relatives began to approach, cousins I hadn't seen since high school, old family friends who remembered me as a quiet, bookish teenager. And every single one of them had that same look in their eyes, that soft, pitying expression, as if I were a charity case they were all relieved to see hadn't completely fallen apart. My cousin Jennifer came over with her husband, a man I didn't recognize. "Nellie, wow. It's been forever. How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice laced with a sympathy I didn't understand. "I'm doing great, Jennifer. How are you?" "Oh, married now, obviously," she said, flashing her diamond ring. "2 kids, a house in the suburbs. The whole American dream." She paused, her gaze softening with concern. "Are you still? I mean, did you ever get back on your feet after everything?" I was growing more confused and frustrated by the minute. What divorce? What job situation? What was this narrative they had all been fed? "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I started to say, but Jennifer was already backing away, her social duty done. "Well, I'm just so glad you made it. Emily will be thrilled." As she walked away, I stood there, trying to process what was happening. Everyone was treating me as if I were a tragic figure, a woman who had been battered by life and was barely scraping by. Where were they getting this information? Deciding to abandon the mystery for now, I began to look for my table. I scanned the elegantly decorated tables near the front of the room. Nothing. I moved to the tables in the middle. Still nothing. My heart began to beat a little faster as I walked toward the head table, where I could see my parents and Emily, radiant in her white wedding gown. It had been 12 long years. My father saw me first. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo and looked older, his hair almost completely gray. As our eyes met, his expression shifted from one of polite conversation to something I couldn't quite decipher. Discomfort, perhaps? Surprise? "Dad," I said softly as I approached the table. "Nellie?" He stood, giving me a stiff, awkward hug. "You came." "Of course. Emily invited me." My mother turned then, and I saw her face for the first time in over a decade. She looked older, more worn than I remembered, but she was smiling. It was the same brittle, performative smile she used to reserve for guests when I was a child. "Nellie, sweetheart, we're so glad you could make it," she said, standing to give me a hug that felt as hollow as her smile. Then, Emily turned. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, an image of bridal perfection. But when she saw me, her expression soured into something that looked unnervingly like disappointment. "Nellie," she said, her eyes sweeping over my simple dress with a critical air. Well, you look like yourself, I guess. Kind of plain." She paused, then added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "But I'm happy you're here. At least you get to see how successful people celebrate a wedding." The comment was a sharp, unexpected slap, but I kept my expression neutral. This was her day. I would not cause a scene. "Congratulations, Emily. You look beautiful," I said simply. My mother quickly stepped in, taking my arm. "Come on, honey. Let me show you to your table." She led me away from the head table, past all the other beautifully decorated tables, all the way to the very back corner of the grand ballroom. There, tucked away near a service entrance, was a small, unadorned table, and on it a single-place card with my name. "Here you are, dear," she said, still wearing that fixed, false smile. "The closest tables are for our closest family and our most successful guests. You understand?" I understood perfectly. They had placed me in exile, as far away from the sphere of importance as physically possible. I sat down at my assigned table, a solitary guest in a sea of celebration, and watched as the wedding ceremony began. As I sat there, an island of isolation in a room full of laughter and music, my mind began to drift back, piecing together the broken fragments of my past. I remembered why I had left, why I had never looked back. Growing up, it was an unspoken but universally understood truth in our household that Emily was the favorite. My parents didn't even try to hide it. When Emily was 7 and expressed a fleeting interest in piano, a brand new upright piano appeared in our living room, along with twice-weekly private lessons. When I was 14 and asked if I could take the free after-school programming classes, my mother told me to focus on more practical skills, like cooking and cleaning. Emily's birthdays were elaborate, themed affairs. Mine were usually acknowledged with a slice of cake after dinner if they remembered at all. For her 16th birthday, Emily received a brand new red Honda Civic. When I turned 16, I was told to take the bus. But I found my own way. I joined the free programming club at school and threw myself into it, discovering a passion and a talent I didn't know I had. My teacher, a kind man named Mr. Rodriguez, saw my potential and encouraged me, lending me books and giving me extra projects. I started a small side business fixing computers for our neighbors, earning a little pocket money and a lot of satisfaction. When I graduated from high school with honors, I had applied to several colleges on my own, my hopes pinned on scholarships. The day after my graduation, my parents summoned me to the living room for a talk. "Nellie, you're 18 now," my father began, his tone cold and businesslike. "It's time you started acting like an adult. We don't have the money to send you to college," my mother added, her voice devoid of any warmth. "We need to focus our resources on Emily's education. She has real potential. Besides, it's time for you to move out. We can't have you living here for free while Emily is trying to focus on her studies. She needs her own space." The words knocked the air from my lungs. "Move out? Where am I supposed to go?" "That's for you to figure out," my mother said coolly. "You're an adult now." I begged them for just a few weeks, a little time to save up for a deposit on an apartment, but they were resolute. I had until the end of the week. 3 days later, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a backpack. My best friend, Jessica, whose parents were out of town, let me stay at her house while I figured out my next move. A week later, the acceptance letters arrived. I had been accepted to 4 colleges, and one of them, a state university in a neighboring state, offered me a full academic scholarship, including room and board. When Jessica's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chan, returned from their vacation and found out what had happened, they were horrified. They had known me since I was a child and had always treated me with a kindness and warmth that was absent in my own home. They gave me $3,000 of their own money to help me get settled and drove me to the airport themselves. I'll never forget what Mrs. Chan said as she hugged me goodbye, her voice thick with emotion. "Make us proud, sweetheart. Show them what they're missing." College was a whirlwind. I worked 2 part-time jobs to support myself while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, but I loved every minute of it. I was studying computer science, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. In my junior year, I met David Mitchell in an advanced programming class. He was brilliant, funny, and shared my passion for technology. We started as study partners, then friends, then more. We were married in a simple courthouse ceremony right after graduation, with only a few friends as witnesses. I took his last name, and we moved to Silicon Valley to start our careers. We both landed jobs at established tech companies, but our real dream was to build something of our own. We spent our nights and weekends hunched over our laptops in our tiny apartment, developing a revolutionary piece of software that would streamline database management for large corporations. After 2 years of relentless work, we had something incredible. We pitched it to several major companies and, in a life-altering deal, sold the software to IBM for $12 million. With that capital, we started our own software development company, Mitchell Tech Solutions. We were young, ambitious, and suddenly very wealthy. Our company grew at an exponential rate, attracting bigger and bigger clients. Within 5 years, our combined net worth was over $50 million. But our professional success came at a personal cost. We grew apart, our shared passion for business eclipsing our love for each other. After 8 years of marriage, we realized we were better as business partners than as husband and wife. Our divorce was amicable, a simple and respectful division of our shared assets. We remained friends and continued to run the company together as co-COS. Now, at 30 years old, I was personally worth an estimated $30 million. I owned a beautiful home in the hills above Palo Alto, drove a luxury car, and my company was one of the most respected in the industry. I had been featured in Forbes and TechCrunch and had given keynote speeches at major tech conferences. But my family knew none of this. In their minds, I was still the girl they had cast out, the one they had deemed unworthy of their support. I was jolted back to the present by the sound of applause as the wedding ceremony concluded. My father stood up at the head table and took the microphone. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Emily and Michael's special day," he began, launching into a glowing tribute to Emily's accomplishments, her marketing degree, her job at a mid-level advertising agency, her wonderful, charming personality. My mother then took her turn, gushing about Michael, the perfect son-in-law. Just as my father was about to wrap up the speeches, a voice from the back of the room shouted, "What about Nellie? Let's hear from the other sister." I froze. A wave of panic washed over me. I could see the color drain from my parents' faces. Emily looked annoyed. But the crowd was looking at me expectantly, and my father, trapped by social convention, had no choice. "Of course," he said, his smile tight and forced. "Nellie, would you like to say a few words?" Every eye in the room turned to me as I stood and made my way to the front. My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression calm. Michael, the groom, handed me the microphone with a warm smile. But as I reached for it, he paused, his eyes widening as he looked at me more closely. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice amplified by the microphone, echoing through the now silent ballroom. Are you Nellie Mitchell? The Nellie Mitchell who owns Mitchell Tech Solutions." The entire room went still. I smiled, a small, genuine smile, and nodded. "Yes, that's me." Michael's face lit up with an almost childlike excitement. "Oh my God, I can't believe it. You're a legend in the tech industry. I've read all about your work in Forbes and TechCrunch. This is incredible." His words, still booming through the speakers, hung in the air. I glanced at the head table. My parents and Emily were frozen, their faces a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The rest of the room was a sea of wide, staring eyes. "I'm so honored to meet you," Michael continued, oblivious to the family drama unfolding. "Your database management software revolutionized how we handle enterprise data. And Mitchell Tech Solutions, you've worked with Google, Microsoft, Amazon. This is unreal." The room erupted in a cacophony of whispers and murmurs. I took the microphone from Michael, who was practically beaming. "Thank you, Michael." "That's very kind," I said, my voice calm and clear. I looked out at the sea of astonished faces, my gaze finally landing on my family. "I just want to say congratulations to Emily and Michael. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness together." I kept my speech short and simple, then handed the microphone back and walked back to my table. Before I could sit down, my mother was at my side, her face a strange mixture of shock and a desperate, sycophantic sweetness. "Nellie, sweetheart," she cooed, "why don't you come and sit with us at the main table? There's plenty of room. With the family." I looked at her, at the false smile plastered on her face, and I felt a profound sense of release. No, thank you, Mom, I said gently. I'm comfortable where I am. I returned to my table in the back corner, and as I walked, I could feel the energy in the room shift. People were whispering, pointing, looking at me with a newfound respect, a curiosity that bordered on awe. The elderly woman sitting next to me, a distant great-aunt named Helen, leaned over. "Dear, I had no idea," she whispered. "Your parents, they told everyone you were struggling. They said you lived in a rundown apartment, that you were working a dead-end job, and that you had married some alcoholic who left you with nothing." And just like that, everything clicked into place. The pitying looks, the condescending questions, the seat in the back of the room. My parents had spent the last 12 years painting a portrait of me as a complete and utter failure. I just smiled and shook my head. People say a lot of things, Aunt Helen. The rest of the reception was a blur. People kept coming over to my table to introduce themselves, to ask about my work, to bask in the reflected glow of my success. I stayed for another hour, making polite conversation, but the entire atmosphere felt toxic, suffocating. I'd had enough. I quietly slipped out of the ballroom, called a taxi, and returned to the sanctuary of my hotel room. The first thing I did was go online and book the earliest flight home for the next morning. Around 9 p.m., my hotel phone rang. It was an unknown local number. "Hello, Nellie? It's your mother." Her voice was sickeningly sweet. "Michael gave me your number. He got it from some of his tech friends. Honey, we need to talk. Your father and I would love for you to come over for dinner tomorrow before you leave. We want to reconnect." I laughed. A real, genuine, cathartic laugh. "Really? You want to reconnect now? Now that you know I have money?" "That's not it. We've always cared about you. You didn't know how to reach me, Mom. You weren't interested enough to find out. There's a difference." She began to make excuses, her voice growing desperate. We were respecting your privacy. We thought you wanted space." "Stop it," I said, my voice firm. "I know what you told everyone. Aunt Helen told me. You told the whole family I was a failure. That I was living in a dump, married to an addict. You painted me as a charity case. We were just concerned. We didn't know what was happening in your life. So you made things up. You wanted people to think I was a failure, so you told them I was." My mother started to stammer, trying to backtrack, but I was done. "I'm done with this conversation," I said. "And I'm done with all of you. Do not contact me again." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. Within minutes, my cell phone began to light up with texts from other unknown numbers: my father, my cousins, Emily. They all wanted to talk now that they knew. I didn't read most of them. I just blocked each number as it came in. The next morning, as my plane climbed into the sky, leaving my hometown and my toxic family behind, I felt nothing but a profound sense of relief. But I was wrong to think that was the end of it. 2 weeks later, another email from Emily appeared in my inbox. This one was not friendly. "Nellie," it began, "I've done some research and I know how wealthy you are. You're sitting on millions while your family is struggling. It's only fair that you pay for my wedding. We took out a $100,000 loan to pay for it. That's nothing to someone like you, but it's a huge burden for us. After 12 years of neglecting your family, you owe us this much. Family helps family, and we are your family. I expect you to transfer the money within the week." I stared at the email, my mind reeling at the sheer, unmitigated audacity of it. They were demanding I pay for her wedding because I could afford it. I typed back an immediate reply. "Emily, I will not be paying for your wedding or for anything else. For 12 years, you and our parents called me a loser behind my back. You told everyone I was a failure, a charity case. Well, guess what? Losers don't pay for things. And if I am such a failure, why would you want my money? Do not contact me again. If you do, I will have my attorney contact you regarding harassment." I hit send and blocked her email address. It has been 6 months, and I haven't heard from any of them since. I suppose the threat of legal action was a language they finally understood. I am back in my life now, running my company, taking on new challenges, enjoying the fruits of my hard work. I don't feel any bitterness about what happened. In a strange way, I'm grateful. That wedding illuminated the truth of my family and validated the decision I made 12 years ago to walk away. Some people, even those connected to you by blood, are not worth keeping in your life. It was a lesson I had learned a long time ago, and Emily's wedding was simply a powerful reminder that it was a lesson well learned. I was doing just fine without them. And I always would be.